And we are live. Welcome to the show, Moshe. I'm very excited to have you on here because uh, you have been not only studying but also practicing leadership for the last 35 years. And you now work in a security agency doing physical asset protection. And the first question I would ask you is how did you get into leadership?
Well, it started for me in the military. Um, as part of the training process, we learn a little bit about leadership. But what really interested me in leadership was watching some of the people that were already leaders and taking their inspiration, uh, their enthusiasm, and taking their example of how they do things in such a professional manner, and fostering the desire within myself to become as professional as the leaders I saw. The only way I saw to do that was to get the same kind of training that they did, which incorporated a lot of leadership. So I started to develop an interest in it, and it kind of mushroomed from there.
That's amazing. And so, tell me how in the security agency which you work right now, you also on the side teach leadership. What led up to that?
Well, being that I have the advanced level of leadership training that I do and the ability to teach it, uh, I got into the idea of teaching new supervisors in the security industry. See, you have to understand what I saw over the years was supervisors in the security industry leading teams, but the supervisors had no leadership training. So therefore, they had no leadership skill. They didn't know what they were doing half the time. And I saw that as a problem. I thought if you're going to lead your team, especially in a high risk environment like the ones that we were working in, you have to know to know how to lead your team properly so that you can complete the tasks that you're required to complete in a safety conscious manner and bring everybody home safe at the end of the night.
I absolutely love that you looked within your company and you thought, how can I provide value?
Yeah, the value is when you have leaders that are trained and they're able to lead their teams as fluidly as you'd like to see them lead their teams. What that does is that sets a standard in the security industry. And that standard surpasses a lot of the fly by night corporations that just hire anybody. Instead, you have professionals that have training, they have confidence, they have skill, they know how to respond to any situation like that. And that's the kind of physical security asset you want guarding your facility, guarding your event, whatever. People that have confidence and skill and can work as a team, fluid and together.
Mm.
That that's what leadership does.
So let's break that down. What would you say is the classic definition of leadership that most people think?
Well, I'm not sure how most people think, but this is the way I think, and it works for me, and it works for a lot of other people. This is how I teach it. In the Canadian military, we were taught the textbook definition of leadership is as follows: leadership is the art of influencing your subordinates to complete a task in the manner desired by the leader. I'll say that again because it's important enough that it bears repeating. Leadership is the art of influencing your subordinates to complete a task in the manner desired by the leader. There are very specific ways on how they can influence their subordinates to complete those tasks. Number one, and most important, is how you portray yourself. If you portray yourself with confidence and with enthusiasm,
Mm.
that will inspire an interest in the leaders, or sorry, in the followers to follow the leader. That will also inspire them to complete the tasks as required by the leader in the manner desired by the leader, because that's how the leader requires it. Your inspiration to have them follow you is based on your enthusiasm for the project.
Mm.
Okay, so that's what you want to do. You want to bring out a little bit of inspiration by way of enthusiasm in the task you have in front of you. You do that by confidence, by skill.
So Wow, that's interesting. So if you're saying the beginning part of being a leadership is actually being enthusiastic about what your mission is.
Yeah. People follow confidence. They follow skill. They follow enthusiasm. I've been told that I've influenced people to stay in the security industry when they were thinking of quitting because they noticed how enthusiastic I was about my job. I took that as a really serious compliment because it means I was able to inspire people to achieve greater results than they were possibly able to on their own.
So I wanted to ask you, what is the definition of scientific leadership or command, and what is the difference between that and natural leadership?
Well, in order to learn leadership, you have to have a natural affinity for it. But
Mm.
even if you have a natural affinity for it, you still need the training because you need to learn the skills. Say, if you don't have the natural affinity, no amount of training will ever bring it out. You can't develop what isn't there, but what is there still has to be developed. Now, there are two different types of leading your team. There's a scientific method well, that's what I call it, which is called command. Anybody can command because command is a very scientific process, and anybody can learn how to do that. Not everybody can learn how to lead because leadership is more artistic in its flow. When it flows nice and easy, it's very artistic in nature because it just happens. Command is very systemic. It has to be set in motion. It has to be set in place, and it's not quite as, shall we say, flowing as leadership is. A
Mm.
good example of artistic leadership is General Douglas MacArthur. His artistic style of leadership was to lead by example, and that leadership by example fostered an interest in other people in following him because they trusted him. They saw his enthusiasm. They saw his ability to inspire his troops by talking to them, by developing interpersonal relationships with his troops, and now uh, they they followed him because they liked him, because they trusted him. So leadership is an artistic flow of ideas. It's an artistic flow of inspiration, of enthusiasm, which causes other people to naturally follow you.
Mm.
Command is quite simply just directing efforts.
Directing
Leader,
efforts.
yeah, exactly. Directing the efforts of the team. It's a very scientific process. Leadership is an artistic direction of ideas, of energies.
Mm. So it's more energy based. And something that you said over there that resonated with me is that uh, someone can be a natural leader, but you still need to train that. Could you go into how someone can recognize if they're a natural leader or not, and
I
how
can
they can train that?
I can, yeah. You can spot a natural leader if you're trained to do so a mile out. If any, you look at your team and whoever it is that steps up to the plate and says, "Yeah, we can get this done," right? Whoever steps up to the plate and helps other people when they're having problems, or whoever uh, puts forth that energy that it inspires other people to work harder, or they feed off their enthusiasm. Those are attributes of a natural leader. A natural leader will naturally step up to the plate and get things done and help other people to get things done as well. But like I said, natural leadership still has to be trained. It's a skill. You have the natural affinity for it, but you don't have the training for it. So you still need to train natural leaders in order to really harness the energy, harness the natural ability that they have within them. And when you can get that person trained to become a leader based on their natural affinity for it, then what you have developed is you have developed a natural artistic leadership quality within a person.
That's interesting. So, say for example, a CEO is looking to foster more leadership in his organization. how can he go about training his younger junior employees in order to be the next leaders of the company?
Well, first he has to know who has the ability to lead, the natural ability to lead. And how you would do that, it's like say in a high-tech company or in a major corporation, how you would do that is you would watch your employees really, really closely. And you try to find people that have the attributes of natural leadership, people that step up to the plate, people that stay later, people that help their fellow employees with tasks. Let's say you have Joe, Jeff, and Bob in a company, and they're all working on finishing reports for these projects. Joe's already finished. Jeff and Bob are still having problems getting their reports finished. So Joe goes over and helps Jeff and Bob so they can get all their reports done. Well, Joe, helping his teammates, has displayed a natural leadership attribute by I'm finished, or I could go home, or I can help my team. See what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And that's a natural attribute, which to me speaks of natural leadership ability. That's the kind of guy I'm going to look for on my team. That's the kind of guy I'm going to recommend for leadership training. That's the kind of guy that eventually is going to be leading his own team because he's got the natural ability to help his team, to inspire them to achieve more results, greater results, faster results. And he's the kind of guy that's going to be able to give that team a sense of accomplishment.
I think that's awesome. So a leader really isn't tunnel visioned. A leader is someone who naturally says, "Who can I help?"
Exactly. A natural leader is somebody who's able to think inside and outside the box. He can see the problem as a whole. He can break it down. He can figure out where the wrinkles are, and he can smooth out those wrinkles within his team. If he can't do that, at the very least, he can, by his example, inspire his team to work closer together to achieve a better result.
What would you say are some other good attributes of an outstanding leader?
One of the most important ones is the processing and sharing of ideas. You do that through conversation. All right, like um, how some companies have like team meetings at the beginning of the day. I call them rah meetings. Yay team! Um, and that's how you inspire the team. You get them keyed up and excited about the project of the day, and then they go out and they attack it. So conversation, communication is one of the most important aspects of a leader, one of the most important attributes. The ability to convey ideas, the ability to facilitate efforts, right? To facilitate your team, because leadership is not just directing or commanding or influencing your subordinates. It's also facilitation. Sometimes what you have to do is you have to give them the task and let them go finish it on their own. Sometimes you have to redirect their efforts. When you see that their efforts are foundering, that's when you step in and you lead. Predominantly, it's a process of facilitation. So the ability to communicate with your team to pass on ideas and pass on instructions is vital and it's important.
I love two things you said there. One is sometimes you need to lead by example, and other times you, as you're saying, yeah, you actually know when you need to step back and say, "Hey, let my team do it."
Yeah. Sometimes you got to give the bull the reins. Um, the only effective form of leadership in my mind is leadership through example. That's the way people will learn. That's how they pick up on your enthusiasm. They see your example, and if they think of you as a confident and strong leader, they're going to want to emulate that example. So that's the most important form of leadership there is, leadership through example. That example, that's what people are going to follow, right? That's how people learn. As a parent, you teach your child through example. You don't swear, you don't light things on fire, you don't eat junk food all the time, you don't eat ice cream for dinner. That example is going to teach your child how to grow up properly. Right? Same thing with your team. The example you give as a leader is going to teach your team what's expected, what's not, what's acceptable, what's not. And that's how they learn.
I love that because you mentioned that leadership is an art form. And if we go back to that very critical definition, which I have here, that leadership is the art of implementing your subordinates to complete a task in the manner designed by the leader. That is a lifetime occupation of learning and mastering that, because you really have to, in order to lead effectively, be able to deal with many different types of people and understand their inner motivations.
Exactly. I mean, the true essence of leadership is very artistic in nature. If you become a really good and skilled leader, the artistic nature is in the fact that you lead your team and you make it look easy. You make the leadership look easy. And when you're able to achieve that, that's the artistic flow of leadership. That's what people follow, right? That's what inspires your team. And you're enthusiastic about leading your team. When you're like, you get leaders that follow the lead teams that really don't want to be in a leadership role. I mean, they may have that natural ability for leadership, but they just don't want to lead a team. They'd rather be a follower. And that's fine. That's fine because they could be good followers. But when you get somebody who is enthusiastic about leading his team, great, I get to lead the team. That's the kind of guy that inspires people to follow him. And that's important because that builds what I call team cohesion. When you have team cohesion, you teach your team how to work better as a team, how to support each other. That's also what helps the process of the projects coming along to fruition.
So it's almost something natural within someone. And it's like, if you have that ability within yourself to want to help others along in order to achieve the greater mission, then perfect. But if you are not someone that feels like they're a natural leader, you are more of a follower, then that's also fine.
Yep, we also need strong followers. Strong followers are built by strong leaders. Now, bear in mind, a leader is also always a follower. Like a team leader in a corporation takes his orders from somebody up, okay, and he passes those orders down. So he's also a follower. You have to be a good follower in order to be a good leader. That's part of the process. You have to learn how to follow before you can learn how to lead. You have to learn how to crawl before you can walk. Get the idea? So that's what it comes down to. And you can always spot a really good, strong leader by when he talks about, say, a project or whatever, or he talks about how he likes to lead his team. You can see a little gleam in his eye. You can see the passion for leadership come out within him. That's the enthusiasm. And that is absolutely vital in a strong and effective leader.
Let's go to the other side, if we may. What are some pitfalls that you see some leaders fall into?
Some pitfalls I've seen over the years, there are so many, it's just hard to count them. Um, Leaders that think they're more than what they are. A team leader who thinks he's patent, that's not going to work. You have to understand what your parameters are as a leader. If you're a team leader on a project, that doesn't make you the CEO of the company. It makes you a project team leader. So you have to work within the parameters that you're given to work with. And like I said, those orders come from up high. And if you supersede those orders, if you supersede that authority level, that makes you an ineffective leader because you're not staying within the proper parameters. Uh, Leaders that utilize too much disciplinary action with a team is also ineffective because it builds animosity on a team and they don't work well with the leader, and the trust in the leader starts to dissipate because of that. Leaders that are too casual, too sociable, or too friendly, that are not able to enforce discipline on the team or amongst the team members when he has to, is also an ineffective leader because it basically teaches the team that they can slack off and nothing's going to happen, right? Leaders that are unable to communicate what needs to be done. If you have a specific set of parameters you have to work on within a project, you need to be able to communicate those parameters to your team in order for them to fully understand. And you cannot do it on your own level. You have to start at your team's level. That's one very big pitfall. If you know more about this project than your team, you can't start at your level of understanding. You have to start at their level of understanding and build it up. Things like that. Those are pitfalls in a leader. Picking a favorite team member
Mm,
over all the other ones. That's an important pitfall to watch out for as well, because what that does is that sets somebody else above the rest of the team, and the team should be equals, right? Also, as the team leader, you don't work over somebody, you work with somebody.
mm,
You include the team on the same level as you. All you're doing is you're leading the team, but you're still a member of the team. So you cannot set yourself above your team. All you're doing is facilitating the efforts of your team. These are some of the pitfalls that some leaders fall into that create ineffective leadership.
wow, I'm so glad that this has been recorded because you've dropped some really paradigm shifting mindsets over there. And uh, just a couple that I want to go back to. It's such a careful balance between setting the personality of the company or the your team, but also being able to discipline. It's like a very careful spectrum that.
It is. It's like a high wire act. You've got a very, very delicate balance you have to set. Uh, for instance, one of the things you should never do as a leader is you should never penalize or discipline your team in front of their teammates,
Mm,
because that sets the person aside as somebody that made a mistake. And whether or not it's right, whether or not it's perceived, the other teammates will see him as less effective than they are. And that could create a lot of animosity. It also embarrasses that team member in front of his teammates. So when you have to discipline somebody, you take them aside one on one. But on the other side of that coin, when you have a really favorable result that one of the teammates has achieved in that project, you bring the team together and you praise that person in front of the other team. What that does is that gives him a sense of success and a sense of accomplishment. It also teaches the other team mates that when you do that, you receive praise. They
mhm.
want to emulate that. They want a piece of the pie too. So they're going to work harder to get that praise. And I'll tell you something right now, people will work much harder for praise than they ever will for money. That's a universal rule that I fully believe in. It's set in stone. People will work harder for praise and for recognition than they ever will for money.
Mm.
That's human nature. So discipline in private, praise in public.
And that goes to why you don't, I think, pick a favorite, correct? Because you want everybody to
Exactly.
work for that.
Exactly. There should be no favorites on a team. Every team member is special. Every team member is equally important. There's no one team member that is less important. In Japan, in the Japanese restaurants, they set one day aside to uh, give praise and respect to the dishwasher. The reason being that it doesn't matter if you have award-winning teppanyaki chefs cooking the food for the people. If you don't have clean dishes, you don't have a restaurant. So each member of the team in that restaurant is equally important. They have different jobs, but they have equally important tasks.
I
So
love
that's
because
why they do that.
you mentioned before that a really good leader is someone that would never tell one of his employees to do something that he would never do.
Exactly. That is something people will pay attention to. If you expect people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself, right, you're an ineffective leader because you're expecting something that is unrealistic. If I, let's say in security, if we have a situation where we have to go in to a building and flush out a suspect because he's broken in, I send my team in, but I stay outside. If I don't have a really good reason for that, they're not going to want to go in there. So as a team leader, you have got to lead your team from the front, not the rear. You can't expect them to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. And when you can demonstrate that you're willing to go ahead and lead from the front and do the things that you're expecting your team to do, They'll see that, and that's part of leadership through example. That's an important aspect of leadership through examples. They will follow that example and they will go ahead and do the things that you need for them to do.
Hmm. Something interesting that you mentioned was this idea of being firm, friendly, and fair.
Yes, absolutely. That's very important as well. We call it the three F's of leadership. When a leader is only firm when he needs to be and friendly the rest of the time, within reason, of course, he is a fair leader. It's like the two F's on the one side and the third F holding up a scale. Firm, friendly equals fair.
Firm, friendly equals fair.
Exactly. In proper proportions.
Mm. When we first met and we were speaking, something that came to mind that a leader should always do, but it's actually very difficult because it shows a lot of vulnerability, is to own up to your mistakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, leadership through example. Everything comes down to the definition of leadership and leadership through example. Those are the two clinch pins that hold the entire thing together. You have to own your mistakes. If you make mistakes, bring it out in public, share it with the team, and say, yeah, this was me. I screwed up. I'm sorry. Let's fix it. When one of your team members that you're leading makes a mistake, you have to generate an interest in him to own his mistakes, learn from mistakes, and move on. But you can't just point out the mistakes. You have to teach the proper way. Let's say you have an accountant who's adding up a specific set of figures for, like, end of month report for financial reports. He makes a mistake on a specific column. You can't just say you made a mistake on column F and leave it at that. What you have to do is you have to say, listen, you made a mistake on column F. Here's how we need to do it right. And you show him the proper way to do it. That way, right? Not only does he understand that he made a mistake, he learns from that mistake. He learns how to do it properly. So next time he's not going to make that same mistake. So that's an important aspect of leadership as well.
It's so incredible to hear you go into depth like this because really the running of a business is fundamentally based upon effective leaders. Because if effective leaders are not there, a teammate, for example, is not going to own up to their mistake, is not going to feel enthusiastic, empowered, in line with the company's mission. And if they're not there, well, that's going to affect productivity. That's going to affect the success of the business.
It is, yeah. I mean, like I say, leadership through example. If they see a leader who's willing to admit to his mistakes, they won't feel as shamed, I guess, so embarrassed by owning up to their mistakes. Leadership through example. That's what it comes down to once again. But this is also how we learn. We learn more from mistakes than we ever do from success. Thomas Edison, I think he tried to invent the light bulb over 400 times before he got it right. Every time he failed, he learned. This is the thing. You can't ignore these kind of mistakes because he was the only one doing it. But the idea is still the same. You learn more through failure than you do through success. And all those failures come up to learn, teach lessons to create success.
That's really beautiful. Moshe, you have given us so many different tips, and I'm definitely going to go back and listen to this again. Thank you so much for your time. And just to hear 35 years of practiced leadership and to hear that distilled down like this is really fundamental. So thank you very much for your time. It was an honor having you on the show.
It was my pleasure to be here. One last
Mm.
note with regard to what we just touched on with owning your mistakes. The leader has to understand that there's no such thing as a bad follower, only a bad leader. And when a leader understands that, he can look within himself and he can understand what it means to be a good leader as opposed to a bad leader. Integrity is very important in this particular process because only with integrity will you own up to your mistakes. Only with integrity are you willing to say, okay, I messed up. This is mine. Let's fix it, or I'll fix it.
That is so fundamental. And just besides that, like showing that your teammates that you are human and that it's okay to make mistakes and to encourage people to come forward with mistakes. That is
Yep.
wow.
You have to communicate though. Making mistakes is not the problem. The problem is when you don't learn from them. The problem is when you try to cover those mistakes up. That's where the problem lies. So the leader has to encourage people to bring their mistakes out so that the entire team, not just that one person, but the entire team can learn from those mistakes and become better because of it. The more we make mistakes, the more we learn. The more we learn, the better we get.
I love that. And fostering that uh that that okayness, like not shaming an employee for making a mistake, but actually saying, okay, team, like what can we learn from this? How can we all together get better? That's
Exactly. Taking a mistake and turning it into a teaching point is an important process that a leader can facilitate amongst his teammates to make that team better, more confident, more skilled, more cohesive as a team, so that your result exceeds expectations.
I actually thought of another question, if I
Yes,
may. So, what can someone junior that's in a company and has just listened to all of this, but realizes that their boss is acting instead of like the art of leadership, more on the command side of leadership and is acting like a tyrant? What can they do in that situation?
well, the first step should always be to approach the leader in private and talk to him about your concerns. Listen, I've noticed you're doing things like this, and it's creating a problem amongst the team because they're scared of making mistakes because they think they're going to come down on them like a ton of bricks. Approach the leader and talk to him about your concerns. If that leader has any worth as a leader, he will seriously consider what you've said and he will try to improve his situation because of it. He'll try to improve the way he leads the team because of that. If that doesn't work, that's why we have the chain of command, even in business, not just in the military, but even in business. There's a chain of command, there's a hierarchy. And if your immediate supervisor is acting in such a manner, he won't fix the problem. He won't fix himself to become a more effective leader. You can always go the next step up.
I love that. And I love that you've given a formula today that someone that's in that position that wants to take on more leadership, you are basically saying that if someone wants to be a leader and feels like they have that natural ability within them, well, they can look for ways in which they can help their colleagues, their peers.
Exactly. Somebody is always watching. That's something you have to remember. Somebody is always watching the employees. And there's always somebody who knows how to look out for good leadership qualities. Always. It doesn't matter what company you work for, there's always somebody who knows how to spot good leadership. And I'll tell you, enthusiasm will open doors that nothing else will. And you don't have to verbalize about it, just your performance. The enthusiasm that these people are looking at see will get noticed. And that will open doors that nothing else possibly ever could. Enthusiasm is one of the most important energies in the universe today.
I love that. The code is enthusiasm.
Exactly.
Moshe, again, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing all of those years of knowledge and wisdom, that hard earned practice, knowledge and wisdom. And hopefully, whoever's listening to this podcast, may we strive to be better leaders because better leaders motivate the people around us and ultimately change the direction of companies, organizations, and even people's lives.
Well, my friend, I was honored that you would ask me, and it was definitely my pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. Mm.